A rich heiress pretending to be a delivery girl flash marries a poor driver, unaware he is the millionaire CEO. She was a rich heiress, but desperate to escape a life of arranged marriages. He was a humble driver just trying to get by. When they accidentally swapped lives in a moment of desperation, a flash marriage sealed their fate. Neither knew the shocking truth about the other. But as secrets begin to unravel, one thing becomes clear. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, nothing is ever what it seems. The sun dipped low over the sprawling city of New York, painting the skyline with hues of orange and pink. The sound of traffic hummed in the distance, a constant reminder of the pulse of a world that never truly slowed down. Yet inside the grandiose penthouse of the Whitmore family, all was still, thoroughly so. For the woman who lived here, the woman who had been born into a world of luxury and wealth, the silence was deafening. Selena Whitmore sat by the large floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city below, but her mind was elsewhere. Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the rim of her wine glass, the deep red liquid swirling gently inside. Despite the opulence that surrounded her, her gold-trimmed furniture, the priceless works of art that adorned the walls, and the grand chandelier above, there was a heaviness that weighed down on her chest, a suffocating feeling she could never seem to escape. She had it all: a prestigious family name, a bank account that could buy anything she could ever need. And yet, in all her years of wealth and privilege, there was one thing she had never been able to buy: freedom. Her mother, the ever-demanding matriarch of the Whitmore dynasty, had spent her life preparing Selena for a future she had never chosen. The men her mother brought to her parties, the suitors, each one more successful than the last, each one eager to claim the Whitmore fortune, to bask in the light of a name that commanded respect. But none of them had ever caught her heart. They were all just pawns in a game her mother had carefully crafted for her, a game she had never wanted to play. It wasn't just the arranged meetings or the endless string of superficial dates that left her feeling empty. It was the way her own life had been dictated for her, the way her every move, every decision had been controlled by the heavy expectations placed upon her shoulders since birth. There was no room for her desires, her dreams, only the future her mother had planned. A future that involved marrying into wealth, maintaining the family name, and fulfilling the role of a perfect, poised heiress. Selena was tired of it. Tired of pretending to be something she wasn't. Tired of living a life dictated by everyone but herself. And yet, she felt trapped. She had never known any other life, and the thought of stepping away from everything she had ever known filled her with a cold dread. What would she become if she turned her back on it all? What would she be without the name, the power, the wealth? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the doorbell echoing through the penthouse. Selena sighed, standing up from her chair and walking toward the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, but then again, that was often the case. Her life was filled with unexpected visits from people who thought they had the right to make decisions for her. When she opened the door, she was met with the last person she ever expected to see. Standing before her was a man, tall, dark-haired, and with the kind of rugged handsomeness that seemed so out of place in her world of polished perfection. His clothes were simple, jeans and a button-down shirt, and yet, somehow, he looked more put together than most of the men she had been introduced to over the years. His eyes locked with hers, and she could see the weight of something deeper. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said, his voice low and steady, "but I believe we've got a little mix-up here." Selena blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, but I think you're at the wrong place." The man held up a small envelope in his hand. "I don't think so," he said. "I was hired to deliver this to you." Selena's gaze shifted to the envelope. Her curiosity piqued. She hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing him into the apartment. She was used to strange deliveries, but something about this man felt different. An unexpected presence that seemed to stir something inside her. He handed her the envelope, and she took it cautiously. As her fingers brushed against his, she felt a strange electric current pass through her, but she quickly dismissed it as her imagination. It had to be. "I'll leave you to it," he said, stepping back toward the door. "Just doing my job." Selena nodded, too caught up in the mystery of the letter to respond. She closed the door behind him, her fingers already tearing open the envelope. Inside there was a simple note. "Meet me at midnight. The rest will come after." Her brow furrowed as she read the message again. She looked down at the envelope, then back at the door, wondering if she had just stepped into some strange plot or game. But there was a part of her, a part she hadn't realized existed until that very moment, that was eager to see where this would lead. There was something about this message, about this man, that felt different. For the first time in years, Selena felt the smallest flicker of excitement, a feeling that had long since been buried under the weight of her family's expectations and the life she had been forced to live. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Selena couldn't help but wonder, who was this man, and why was he reaching out to her? She had no answers, but one thing was clear. Whatever this was, it was her chance to escape the suffocating world she had been born into, her chance to do something for herself. For the first time in her life, she felt like she might actually be in control of her own destiny, and that was a terrifying, exhilarating thought. Meanwhile, across town, Alex Miller was just finishing his shift. His hands ached from hours of hard work, his shirt stained with grease and sweat. The harsh fluorescent lights of the garage flickered as he wiped his brow with the back of his hand. He wasn't used to this kind of work, not anymore. His life had been drastically different years ago. Alex had once been someone else, someone important, but that was a long time ago. Now, he was just a mechanic, a man who fixed cars for a living and tried to keep his head down. But there was something about tonight, something about this assignment that felt different. He'd been hired to deliver a message, nothing more. But he knew who the message was for. It was for Selena Whitmore. And if he was honest, he didn't expect things to go the way they were supposed to. There was something about the woman that had always intrigued him. Maybe it was the fact that they had come from such different worlds, or maybe it was the way she had always seemed untouchable, unreachable. But tonight, something was going to change. Something big. Because tonight, they would meet again. And neither of them knew how much their lives were about to be turned upside down. Mission 1. The Unlikely Encounter. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual in the silence of the penthouse. Selena Whitmore glanced at it once more, feeling the seconds slip away. Midnight was approaching, and with it, a sense of both dread and anticipation. She stood by the large windows, staring at the city below, but her mind kept drifting back to the mysterious note. "Meet me at midnight. The rest will come after." What did it mean? Who was this person who knew enough about her to leave such a cryptic message? She had lived a life of high society, surrounded by the powerful and the wealthy, yet no one had ever treated her like this. There were no expectations, no pressure to be anything other than herself, and it was unsettling. She glanced over her shoulder toward the small table where the envelope had been placed. Her fingers had touched the rough, worn paper when she first opened it. The smell of the ink and paper still lingered, but now it only fueled her curiosity further. With a deep breath, Selena turned and walked toward the door. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she was making a mistake. But deep down, she knew she had to find out. She was tired of being trapped in a world that didn't fit her. The endless parties, the fake smiles, the men who only saw her as a trophy, none of it mattered anymore. She wanted something real, something different. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her mother, reminding her of another charity gala she was expected to attend tomorrow. It was followed by a string of other messages, each more insistent than the last. She could almost hear her mother's voice through the words. "You must be seen, Selena. This is your future." The pressure was suffocating. She tossed her phone aside and shook her head. No more. Tonight, she would take control of her own life. She had to. She owed it to herself. The sudden ring of the doorbell startled her. It was almost time. The man was here. Selena opened the door to find him standing there again, the same man who had delivered the message earlier. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a sense of quiet intensity about him, like someone who had been through much more than he let on. His eyes, deep and penetrating, met hers without hesitation. He was standing just a few steps away, his posture casual but purposeful, as though he had expected this moment for a long time. She noticed the subtle shift in his expression as she opened the door, but he didn't speak immediately. "Are you ready?" His voice was calm, yet there was an underlying urgency, a hint of something he wasn't saying. Selena swallowed hard. "Ready for what?" The man took a small step forward, his presence taking up more space in the hallway. "For everything to change," he said, his tone soft but firm. for everything you think you know about your life to be turned upside down. Her heart beat faster, but there was no turning back now. She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He glanced around the lavish interior of the penthouse, taking in the luxurious surroundings with a brief but observant eye. The dim lighting of the grand chandelier cast long shadows across the marble floors, making the place feel even more imposing than usual. Selena's world was a far cry from his, and she knew that. Everything about him screamed outsider, and yet that was exactly what made him so intriguing. "What is it you want from me?" she asked, crossing her arms in front of her, almost defensively. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out at the view of the city, his gaze distant. "You've been living a life you didn't choose, a life everyone else designed for you." His voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the power behind his words. "You've been trapped in a gilded cage." Selena stiffened, her breath caught in her throat. There it was again, the truth she had been avoiding for so long. It was like he could see straight into her soul, could feel the weight of the years she had spent trying to please everyone but herself. "I didn't ask for this life," she whispered, her voice shaky. "It's not mine, but it's all I've known." He finally turned to face her fully, his eyes softened with something akin to understanding. "Then let's change that." He took a step closer, and though Selena's instinct told her to step back, she didn't. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. But at the same time, there was a dark mystery surrounding him, something she couldn't quite grasp. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice low, barely above a whisper. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small silver key. He held it out to her. "This is for you," he said. "It's the key to something different, something real. But you'll have to come with me to find out what." Selena hesitated. She had no idea what this man was talking about, what this key represented, and yet, the longing for something new, something true, burned deep within her. She didn't know how she knew, but she trusted him in this moment. She took the key from his hand, her fingers brushing against his for a fleeting moment. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice steady now. He gave her a small, enigmatic smile. "To a place where you can finally breathe. A place where you don't have to be someone you're not. A place where you can find out who you really are." Selena looked down at the key in her hand, the cool metal heavy in her palm. It felt like a promise, a possibility. It felt like the first real decision she had ever made for herself. The man turned toward the door, then stopped. "Come with me, Selena. It's your choice. But if you don't, I can promise you this. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been." Her heart pounded in her chest as she glanced around the room, her gaze landing on the luxurious furnishings, the perfect life she had been living, but never truly living. For the first time in a long time, she felt the urge to walk away, to escape, to live for herself. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and followed him out the door, not knowing where this journey would lead, but knowing it was the only way forward. As they exited the building, the cold night air hit Selena's face. The streets of New York seemed so far away from the world she had just left behind. She looked around, seeing the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, unaware that she was about to step into a world she had never imagined, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her family, and the choices she would have to make. The man led her toward a black car waiting at the curb. He opened the door for her, and after a moment's hesitation, she climbed in. The door shut softly behind her, and as the car began to move, she couldn't help but feel that she was finally free. The city blurred past them, and the night seemed to stretch on forever as Selena tried to process what was happening. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in years she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Mission 2. The Silent Truth. The car ride was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional streetlight flashing through the windows. Selena sat back against the plush leather seat, her fingers loosely gripping the small key he had given her. It felt heavier now than it had moments ago, as if the weight of her decision was slowly beginning to settle in her chest. She couldn't quite pinpoint what it was, this unsettling sense of anticipation and dread mixed into one, but she knew that she had crossed a line. She could never go back to the life she had known. The man, whose name she still didn't know, sat across from her, his expression unreadable as he stared out of the window. His dark features were calm, but there was an edge to him that made Selena feel both uneasy and intrigued. She found herself wondering about his past. What had led him to this moment? What did he want with her? She had never been the type to trust easily, but tonight felt different. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he held himself, that felt authentic in a world where so many people wore masks. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story, more to his involvement in her life, than he was letting on. After what seemed like an eternity, the car finally slowed down. Selena's heart skipped a beat. The vehicle turned down a narrow street, the lights of the city fading behind them as they moved deeper into an area she didn't recognize. The buildings here were older, their facades cracked and worn, the streets less polished, more live-in. It was a stark contrast to the glittering luxury she was used to, a reminder of the world outside her bubble. The car came to a stop in front of a modest brick building that looked out of place against the towering skyscrapers around it. The street was quiet, eerily so, and there was an unsettling stillness in the air, the kind of stillness that made Selena's skin prickle with unease. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice small, as she looked out at the building. It was no mansion, no extravagant penthouse, just a simple, unremarkable structure that looked as though it had seen better days. The man didn't respond at first. He opened the door and stepped out, then turned to her, his eyes narrowing just slightly, as if gauging her reaction. "This is where it all begins," he said quietly. Selena hesitated. The key in her hand felt colder now. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, but nothing about this place felt welcoming. In fact, it felt like the opposite of everything she had known. But something about the way he spoke, the calmness in his voice, kept her rooted to the spot. "Are you coming?" he asked, his voice firm, though there was a gentleness behind it, something that made her want to follow him. She took a deep breath, the air feeling cooler than she had anticipated. With a final glance at the car, she stepped out and followed him up the steps to the building's entrance. The door creaked open as he pushed it, revealing a dimly lit hallway. The faint scent of old wood and dust filled the air, and as Selena stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. There was something heavier here, something that made her feel both intrigued and uncomfortable at the same time. The man led her down the hallway, past a series of rooms with closed doors before stopping in front of a heavy wooden door at the end of the corridor. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another key, identical to the one he had given her earlier. With a smooth motion, he unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside was a small, sparse room. A desk sat against one wall, cluttered with papers and files. A few worn chairs were arranged in the center, and a single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the space. It wasn't the kind of room one would expect to find in the heart of New York City. It felt more like something out of a forgotten era, tucked away from the world outside. Selena stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. The walls were lined with bookshelves, but the books were old and worn, their spines faded with time. A large window at the far end of the room looked out onto the street, but the blinds were drawn, leaving the room bathed in shadows. "What is this place?" Selena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "This is where you start over," he said simply. "This is where you leave everything behind." Selena's heart raced. The words hung in the air like a promise, or perhaps a warning. She took a step back, suddenly feeling small in this strange. "I don't understand," she admitted. "I don't even know who you are, what this is all about." The man's gaze softened, and for the first time, Selena saw a flicker of something, regret perhaps, or was it something more? He sighed deeply, as if preparing himself to reveal something he had been holding back for a long time. "I'm someone who knows what it's like to be trapped in a life that doesn't belong to you," he said, his voice low and measured. "I know what it's like to have everything, wealth, power, influence, and still feel like you're suffocating. I've been where you are, Selena. I've watched people like you go through the motions, play the part, but never truly live." Selena swallowed, her breath catching in her throat. His words struck a chord deep within her, resonating with the truth she had long buried inside. She had everything: wealth, status, admiration, but she had never truly felt alive. Every smile, every glance, every gesture had been part of a script, an image she had been taught to project. And now, here she was, in a small, dimly lit room, with a man who seemed to know exactly what she had. "You don't know what it's like," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "You don't know what it's like to be constantly watched, to be expected to be perfect all the time, to never have a moment of freedom." The man's eyes softened even further, and for a moment it was as if the walls between them crumbled. "I do know," he said quietly. "I know exactly what that feels like, and that's why I'm here, to help you get out." Selena's chest tightened as she processed his words. Could he really understand? Could he really help her? Or was this just another illusion, another game? Her mind raced with questions, but one thing was certain. She'd taken go back. She had taken the first step, and now there was no turning back. When she looked at him, her eyes searching for the truth behind his words. "What do I have to do?" The man smiled slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him. "All you have to do is trust me." As the night wore on, the man, whose name she realized she still didn't know, began to explain the rules of this strange new world he was offering her. There were no promises, no guarantees, but what he was offering was more than just an escape. It was a chance to truly live, to break free from the chains that had bound her for so long. "Tomorrow, you'll begin your training," he said, his voice steady. "You'll learn things that will change your life forever, and once you do, there's no going back. You'll have the power to change everything." Selena nodded slowly, her heart still racing. She had no idea what she was stepping into, but there was no fear in her heart. There was only the promise of something better, something real. As the night faded into early morning, Selena knew one thing for certain. The life she had once known was over, and whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it. Mission 3. The Phantom Behind the Glass. The morning came not with sunlight, but with gray skies and a steady drizzle tapping against the windows of the brick building. Selena sat alone in the narrow kitchen of the hidden place, her new home, if it could be called that, staring down at a chipped porcelain cup filled with lukewarm tea she hadn't touched. It felt like the rain was mimicking her mind, unclear, heavy, and ceaseless. The man, still nameless, had disappeared after giving her a vague instruction the night before. "Rest. Tomorrow the truth begins." But morning had come and gone, and there was no sign of him. She paced the room, her fingers brushing the old wallpaper, tracing its faint floral pattern, wondering what kind of place this had once been. A boarding house? An office? Or a sanctuary for someone else who had once run from the world? The place had character, hidden lives embedded in its walls. Suddenly a door creaked open down the hall. Heavy footsteps echoed against the wood flooring. Selena stiffened, her breath caught. He appeared in the doorway, dressed in a black turtleneck and charcoal gray slacks, looking effortlessly powerful without the armor of a tailored suit. The storm behind his eyes had not softened. "You slept?" he asked, voice even. "I barely blinked," she admitted, folding her arms. He nodded, as if he expected that answer. Then he motioned toward the hole. "Come with me." They walked through the narrow corridors until they reached another door, one she hadn't noticed before. It was made of thick, frosted glass, with one word etched faintly across it. "Truth." He opened it and stepped aside to let her in first. The room was cold, not in temperature, but in spirit. It was larger than she expected, lined with tall bookshelves and an old projector screen in the center. A long wooden table sat beneath it, with 2 leather chairs on either end. On the wall opposite the entrance hung a large framed photograph. Selena's eyes caught it immediately. Her breath stilled. It was her. Younger, 16, hair curled, lips painted red, wearing a white evening dress at one of her father's galas. But she wasn't alone. Beside her in the photograph stood him, the man. Looking years younger, dressed in a server's tuxedo, his face softer, but the eyes were unmistakable. Selena turned slowly toward him, her voice trembling. "That night?" "You don't remember me?" he said, more of a statement than a question. Selena stared at the photograph, her memories spinning like loose pages in a storm. "I remember dancing with my father. I remember a young waiter spilled champagne and was dragged out by security. You watched it happen, he said, his tone unreadable. Her face paled. That was... you? He stepped closer to the photograph. They dragged me through the back alley like a criminal. Your father fired... Selena clutched the edge of the table for balance. Her throat was dry. I didn't know. I was just a kid. I didn't have power. You had a voice, he cut in sharply. Then softer, but you didn't use it. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. Why bring me here? Why now? Because, he said, his voice dropping to a hush, you're not the enemy. You're the proof that even the powerful can be trapped, and I want you to understand. What I've built, what I've become, was born from that moment. He walked to a side cabinet and opened a drawer. From it, he pulled out a brown envelope and handed it to her. Open it. Selena slowly unsealed the envelope and pulled out a single photograph. A hospital bed. A woman, frail, hollow-eyed, clutching a small teddy bear. And beside her, a young man holding her hand. Selena gasped. Your mother? She nodded. She had stage 4 lymphoma. I took the job at your father's gala to pay for her treatments. That night was supposed to be a double shift. I was saving every dollar. He turned toward the window, back tense, eyes distant. She died 3 weeks later. Silence fell like a guillotine. Selena's knees buckled and she sat slowly into the chair, clutching the photo like it could somehow reverse time. Her heart felt like it was being scraped with shards of glass. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely audible. I don't want your pity, he said, still not facing her. I want your honesty. She looked up at him. Why me? Why come back now? He turned to face her fully, eyes ablaze with truth. Because I built an empire just to walk back into your world. Not to destroy it, but to see if someone like you could ever see someone like me. Not just as a project, not as charity, but as a man. Selena stared at him, the room spinning. She thought back to the rain, the alley, the night she found him slumped behind the bakery. Filthy, alone, unreadable. She remembered how she knelt beside him, offered him bread, spoke with kindness. But she had no idea who he was. And now, she wondered if he had staged that encounter. Was that night in the alley, was it real? She asked, voice hoarse. A long pause. Then, yes and no. She recoiled slightly. What does that mean? I was there because I needed to see if you had changed, if the girl in the photo had grown into someone who cared about more than appearances. I didn't expect, he paused, his voice softened. I didn't expect to care. Selena closed her eyes, emotions warring inside her. She felt deceived, exposed, but also seen, more deeply than ever before. The room was silent for a long time before she finally asked the question that had been burning in her throat. What now? He walked to the projector, flipped a switch, and a grainy video began to play on the screen. It was surveillance footage of her. Not from the alley, but from years ago. Her handing a sandwich to a school janitor, her hugging a girl with a broken leg in her school hallway, her sneaking food to kitchen staff after charity banquets, moments no one else had ever seen. No cameras, no reporters, just quiet kindness. I've watched you, he said, longer than you know. Tears spilled down her cheeks now. That's not fair. I know, but I had to be sure. Selena stood, trembling. So I'm some test to you, a project to undo your pain? No, he said firmly. You were the hope I didn't know I needed. You showed me that the world I hated might still have something worth trusting. Selena wiped her eyes, heart beating hard against her ribs. She looked at the man she once thought was homeless, who turned out to be the millionaire she never saw coming. You never told me your name, she whispered. He stepped closer, slowly, as if each step carried the weight of years unsaid. Elias, he said. Elias Carrington. The name struck a bell in her mind. CEO of Carrington Holdings, real estate mogul, tech investor. The man behind dozens of city developments. The man everyone believed had vanished 3 years ago after a hostile board coup. "You disappeared," she said, stunned. "I needed to rebuild from the shadows," Elias said, "and I needed to find peace." They stood in silence, the rain continuing to beat softly against the windows. Then Elias said something that cracked the very center of her heart. "I hadn't walked away from that night, if I hadn't been dragged out, maybe my mother would still be alive. Maybe I would have become someone else. But maybe, just maybe, if I hadn't been broken, I wouldn't have found you." Selena's breath hitched. Elias stepped back, giving her space. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I had to show you who I really am, and give you the choice." Selena looked down at the envelope, at the photo of his dying mother, and then back at the photo on the wall of the two of them as teenagers. "I need time," she said. Elias nodded. "Then take it. The next door opens when you're ready." He left the room, his footsteps fading down the hall, leaving her alone in the echo of memory, truth, and the slow-burning realization. This wasn't just about redemption anymore. It was about healing, both of them. And for the first time in years, Selena didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was beginning. Mission 4, the door he never closed. It had been 5 days since Elias Carrington left her alone in that room of truth. Selena hadn't seen him since. The city moved outside her windows. Cars honked, rain came and went, and distant echoes of laughter floated from a nearby cafe. But inside the Carrington brownstone, time stood still. Selena hadn't left. As she couldn't. Not because she was forced to stay. No, Olivia had made it clear she was free to walk away at any time, but because the weight of what she'd learned held her there, like an anchor made of invisible chains. She wandered the house during the day, uncovering pieces of his life hidden in plain sight. Dusty journals filled with architectural sketches and emotional notes, newspaper clippings folded into books, receipts for hospitals she didn't recognize. In one drawer, she found a ticket stub for a small off-Broadway show, a musical called Until the Rain Stops, dated just 1 week before his mother's death. On the back, a name scribbled in blue ink. A Whitmore. She stayed until the last breath. Selena traced the letters again and again. Whoever A. Whitmore was, she had once mattered deeply. Another piece of his past, another shadow. Every night, Selena sat by the fireplace in the den. She hadn't lit it, not once, but it gave her a strange comfort, as if Elias had been there not long ago. And every night, she played the same memory in her mind, the look in his eyes when he said, "If I hadn't been broken, I wouldn't have found you." Until tonight. Tonight, she decided to go searching. She started with the room with the frosted glass, truth, but he wasn't there. She moved next to the small library, where tall windows overlooked the city skyline. A journal lay open on the desk, the ink still fresh. "She's still here. I don't know what that means, but I'm terrified of what it might." Her breath caught. And then she heard it. Soft music coming from below. Not from a speaker. From a piano. Selena followed the sound, her bare feet silent against the wood floors. She found the entrance to the basement behind a narrow door near the kitchen, partially hidden by a tall fern. The air grew cooler as she descended the creaky staircase. There, in the dim light of a single-floor lamp, sat Elias. He didn't look up. His fingers moved across the piano keys with a kind of quiet ache, playing a melody Selena didn't recognize. It wasn't classical, it wasn't jazz. It was something raw, private. A song never meant to be heard. But he didn't stop when she entered. She stood there for several seconds before, softly whispering, "You play." Elias's fingers paused on the final chord. "Only when I can't sleep?" "I didn't know you were here," she said, stepping closer. "I wasn't sure I wanted to be." Selena walked slowly around the piano until she could see his face. He looked tired, not in a weak way, but like a man who had carried too many lifetimes in a single decade. "Who's A. Whitmore?" she asked gently. He didn't flinch. My mother's nurse. The only one who stayed after I lost my job. She was the last to speak to her. Told her I'd tried everything. Told her I loved her. Selena placed a hand on the edge of the piano. You've carried this pain so long. I built a company on it, he said almost bitterly. I created Carrington Holdings to make sure I'd never be powerless again. But power doesn't undo the past. It just gives you better furniture to sit with your regrets. The words hung between them. Selena sat on the bench beside him, their shoulders brushing. Why me, Elias? Really? He exhaled. I watched you give when no one asked, speak when others were silent. You weren't perfect, but you were real. I needed to know if it was possible, if someone born into everything could still have a heart that chooses compassion. Selena swallowed hard. And if I failed your test? I would have vanished. Again. And she shook her head. You say I'm proof, but you're the one who's been surviving with an open wound for years. Alone. Elias's jaw tightened. I wasn't always alone. Selena turned toward him, eyes narrowing slightly. What does that mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, walked to a small cabinet near the piano, and opened a wooden box inside. He pulled out a letter, lowered at the edges, torn from the corner. He handed it to her. Selena opened it carefully. It was in her handwriting. Her eyes widened. Dear God. It was a letter she had written when she was 17. To herself. Writing assignment from therapy after her mother's sudden death. A way to process grief. She had been told to burn it. Instead, she left it in the coat pocket she'd worn that night. The night of the gala. Dear future me, if you're reading this, please don't forget to be soft. Don't forget that being kind doesn't make you weak. I know people will betray you, but don't let them turn you into someone who stops believing in love. Selena looked up at Elias, stunned. How did you? I found it in the staff coat room after I was fired, he said quietly. I kept it. I read it every year on the day my mother died. Tears fell freely down her face now. I'll do this time, she whispered. You kept my voice alive when I'd forgotten it myself. Elias's voice cracked. It saved me more than once. Selena stood and walked to him, no longer afraid of the weight between them. She placed the letter on the piano, then reached for his hand. And for the first time, he didn't pull away. You said the next door opens when I'm ready, she said softly. I did. She stepped closer. Then open it. He looked into her eyes, and for a moment he looked like the boy in the photograph again. Not the billionaire, not the strategist, just a man who had loved, lost, and hoped. He led her back upstairs, not to the room of truth, but to another hidden room behind the library wall. Inside were shelves of photo albums, journals, and a massive whiteboard titled, For Her Question. For her, if she ever came back? Selena froze. Dozens of post-it notes outlined initiatives, scholarships, hospital wings, shelters for displaced women, a food distribution network named the Selena Project. She turned, speechless. I built the empire for power, he said, but this was for peace. She turned, stunned. You built this for me? No, Elias corrected. For the version of you I never stopped believing in. Selena let the tears fall. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of being seen. And for the first time since his mother's death, Elias wasn't afraid of being known. In that quiet room, they stood in the middle of a plan meant for healing, not conquest. It was never just about the past. It was about redemption woven through time. And together, they had just stepped into a future neither of them ever expected. Mission 5. A man called E. It rained the next morning, harder than it had in weeks. The skies above Manhattan cracked open like a confession, pouring water down the stone and steel with relentless force. But inside the Carrington brownstone, it was quiet. Warm. Peaceful. Selena woke to the scent of coffee and fresh linen, sunlight faintly trying to pierce through the storm clouds outside. She was in the guest room, but someone had brought her a new robe, a thick, white one, soft, heavy, monogrammed. Olivia said. She ran her fingers over the embroidery, then smiled. Elias Carrington. The man who once signed business acquisitions with brutal efficiency was now quietly folding breakfast napkins in the kitchen below, unsure of how to ask her to stay another day. When she came down, she found him standing barefoot, stirring oatmeal on the stove like a man who'd never known corporate war rooms or multi-billion-dollar mergers. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You slept through the thunder," he said. She grinned, taking the mug he offered. "I think your house has better insulation than my entire apartment complex." "It has a heartbeat," Elias said quietly. Selena glanced at him. What? He looked toward the hallway, where the door to the truth room remained slightly ajar. "This house, it's alive with every mistake I made, every choice, every regret. It's a museum of the man I was, but maybe also the man I'm becoming." There was something vulnerable in his voice this morning. No armor, no tests. Just Elias. Not Carrington. Not CEO. Just the man who once played piano in the dark, trying to forget the sound of machines keeping his mother alive. And for the first time, Selena didn't feel like a visitor in someone else's world. And she felt invited. They ate breakfast slowly as the storm continued to rage outside. Then Elias did something unexpected. He handed her a key. Selena blinked. "What's this?" "Door on 3rd and Lexington. The bookstore." She frowned. "The one with the closed forever sign?" "We was never close," he said. "Just locked until the right person asked." Selena turned the key over in her hand, heart racing. Olivia smiled softly. "Because you told me once, in that letter, you loved stories that made people feel like they belonged somewhere, that you dreamed of owning a bookstore cafe where—" Her throat tightened. "I never told anyone that, not even my ex." "You didn't have to," Elias said. "Your words, your kindness, did. I kept them, and I built something with them." She stared at him. "To open a business? From a letter I wrote at 17. He nodded, sheepishly. "It's called The Quiet Page. I renovated it during the pandemic. No press, no investors. It's the only thing I own that doesn't make a profit. And the only thing that heals me." Selena's voice cracked. "You built a future for a girl who never thought she'd have one. You gave a future to a man who thought he didn't deserve love." There was silence. Then she asked the question that had lingered for days. "What happened that night, Elias, after you were fired?" His eyes lowered. He didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then, "I was walking down 6th Avenue when I saw a man collapse outside the train station. No one stopped. Not one person. I knelt down to help, used the last clean shirt I had to keep pressure on his head. He was homeless, cold, and dying." Selena held her breath. "When the ambulance came, I gave them my name, but the man, he grabbed my wrist, looked at me, and whispered, 'You still have time.'" Elias looked up at her now. "I didn't know what he meant, but I walked away that night and realized every single thing I thought I'd lost might not be gone, just waiting." Selena reached out, fingers wrapping gently around his. "You found your way back." "I thought I had nothing left," Elias said. "But then I opened that letter. Yours, a girl who still believed in softness, who begged her future self not to let the world make her hard." Selena blinked back tears. "I didn't know anyone ever read that letter." "I didn't read it," he whispered. "I lived it." That afternoon, the rain let up. Elias offered to drive her to the bookstore. They didn't speak much during the ride. There was a quiet understanding now, like two people learning the rhythm of a duet, waiting for the next note. When they reached 3rd and Lexington, the corner looked exactly as Selena remembered from her walks. But the shutters were gone. A new sign hung beneath the awning. The quiet part. A place to stay, even if you don't buy. And she swallowed hard and opened the door. It smelled of cinnamon, paper, and something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Inside, velvet chairs lined the walls. Lamps cast golden pools of light over reading nooks. A small cafe counter served tea, coffee, and baked goods from local women-owned businesses. And on one wall, a framed quote in looping cursive. Kindness is never wasted. It just waits to return. Selena turned. Her initials. Elias watched her. I didn't build this to impress you, he said. I built it to remember the person I want to be. And because I wanted you to have something no one could take away again. She nodded, speechless. But as she stepped further in, her eyes fell on a single framed photograph near the register. It was old. Faded. A young woman in a coat. A 17-year-old girl standing beside a food truck on a snowy night, looking directly at the camera. Selena gasped. Night. Elias nodded slowly. I was there. Her knees buckled slightly. I saw you give your meal to a man with no teeth. I watched you laugh like the world hadn't crushed you. And I took that photo. You never saw me. I was just a man called E then, trying to believe again. Selena turned to him, stunned. You remembered me all this time. He stepped forward, voice low. I never forgot you. And in that moment, no thunder, no fanfare, no grand gesture, just the quiet realization that they had been writing this story long before they knew they were in it. Selena reached out. He took her hand. Outside, the rain started again. But inside the quiet page, the door remained open. And Session 6, the letter she never sent. The next morning, the sun rose like a whispered promise over Manhattan, soft and golden, stretching past the rooftops like fingers brushing forgotten memories awake. Selena stood barefoot in the middle of the quiet page, her arms wrapped around a warm mug of lavender tea. The air inside the bookstore felt sacred, like a sanctuary built from the very ache she'd carried in her chest for years. And for once, she wasn't running. She was still. Elias had offered to walk her back to the brownstone the night before, but she had chosen to stay. He'd simply nodded, no questions asked, and handed her a ring of keys before quietly leaving through the side door. She hadn't slept. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to miss a second of this rare, impossible calm. That was when she saw it. Tucked beneath the register, wrapped in an aged silk ribbon the color of faded violets, was a stack of letters. Dozens, maybe more. Some typed, others handwritten in shaky script. All sealed, all unopened. And one had her name on it. Not just Selena, but Selena Morgan, age 17. And her heart stilled. And she opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter. Not one she wrote, one addressed to her. Dear girl with brave eyes. If you're reading this, it means you stay kind, and that alone means the world is still worth something. You don't know me yet, not really, but I saw you once, years ago, in the snow. I watched you give away your only meal to a man who couldn't even say thank you. I remember how you smiled after, like love was still possible in a world that had forgotten how to hold it. I kept that moment inside me when I wanted to give up, when I lost my mother, when the money didn't matter, when no one saw me anymore. You became a lighthouse I never told anyone about. And I built this bookstore for you. Because I hoped, somehow, you'd find your way back to it. And to me. If I've done anything right, I hope it was keeping a place for you to land when the world broke your wings. Selena pressed the letter to her chest. The tears came quietly, not the broken kind, but the kind that comes when the soul is seen without asking to be. She didn't hear the bell ring when the front door opened. Didn't realize Elias had come back, until she turned and saw him there, holding another letter. This one was different. worn, bent at the edges. He held it out wordlessly, and she knew instantly what it was. The letter she wrote but never sent. The one she'd written on the night her father died. She had been 17, and alone and angry. She'd scribbled it down at 2 a.m. on the back of an overdue electricity bill and shoved it into her drawer. In it, she'd poured everything, her grief, her hope, her plea to the universe not to let her heart turn bitter. But she'd never mailed it. "How did you get this?" she whispered. Elias sat beside her. "Your grandmother found it in a donation box years ago. She never knew where it came from, but she said she couldn't throw it away. When I met her, by chance, at a charity auction, she recognized my name on a bid card. Said something strange." He paused. She said, "You remind me of the boy my granddaughter would have loved if life had been fair." Selena's eyes widened. "She gave me this letter," he continued. "Told me to find you if I ever stopped hiding." Silence wrapped around them like velvet. Then Elias added, softer, "I didn't come looking for love that night in the alley, Selena. I came looking for peace. But you brought something else." She looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. "Why?" Later that afternoon, they sat at the corner table by the window, watching the world pass. Selena pulled a worn book from "The Girl Who Gave Me the Courage to Return." And beneath it, a pressed violet, still intact, still whole, just like her. They didn't speak much the rest of the day. But they didn't need to. Some love stories aren't loud. They don't come crashing in with fireworks or declarations. Some love stories are quiet, burned, rebuilt from wreckage and memory. Later that night, as Elias locked up the quiet page, Selena slipped a letter of her own into the backroom drawer. It was addressed, "The next girl who thinks kindness is a waste." And inside she wrote, "It's not. Trust me." And second 7, "The Woman in Red and the Boardroom Betrayal." The peace they'd found at the quiet page was sacred, so fragile it felt like the kind of joy you only spoke about in whispers, for fear of waking whatever curse had gone to sleep. That curses never sleep for long. And when they return, they don't knock. They burst through the door in heels and diamonds. It was a Friday morning when the past walked in, wearing a scarlet coat and a sharper smile. Selena was restocking the poetry section, humming quietly, when she heard the bell. And then, footsteps. Click, click, click. Heels. Confident, cutting. When she turned, the woman was already halfway through the store. Flawless skin, red lips, platinum hair pulled into a perfect knot. Pout. Which that's what Selena saw. And in her hand, a manila folder. Thick, official, dangerous. "Hello," the woman said sweetly, her tone laced with venom. "Is he here?" Dina stood frozen, clutching a worn copy of Rilke's letters. "I'm sorry, who exactly?" But she knew. She didn't have to say it. The woman gave a cold smile. "Elijah Langston, though I imagine he's using Elias these days. He always did like to disappear into softer names when things got complicated." Before Selena could reply, Elias appeared from the back hallway. And everything in him went still. The color drained from his face. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just looked at the woman like he was watching a nightmare. "Hello, darling," the woman purred. "Miss me?" They sat at the old tea table near the back, where stories were usually told with warmth. Not this time. The air turned brittle. Selena lingered near the archway, pretending to shelve books, her body tense. She wasn't eavesdropping. She was protecting something. Her own heart, perhaps. Or maybe his. "I told you never to come here," Elias said, his voice low. "I told you I'd cash in my silence someday," the woman replied, sipping the chamomile tea without a care. "Why do you want Rachel?" Selena's breath caught. I rose to my feet. "Rachel." The name sounded familiar, like a wound she didn't know she had. Then the memories slammed into her. Rachel Monroe. The media had called her the Widowmaker, co-CEO of Langston Enterprises, Elias's former business partner, rumored fiancée, and a woman who disappeared the same month Elias had. Everyone had assumed she'd been pushed out. But what if it wasn't that simple? Rachel tossed the folder on the... Your sabbatical has expired. You're needed back at the board. We're being challenged on the McKenna acquisition. And if you don't sign these documents by Monday, we lose the East Coast corridor. I'm not coming back, Elias said. Her laugh was sharp. Oh, but you are, because if you don't, I go public with everything. Elias's eyes darkened. You wouldn't. Rachel leaned in, her smile soft and cruel. You're not the only one who can disappear into someone new, Eli, but unlike you, I've kept receipts, and if the world finds out what really happened to your father's shares... She let the threat dangle. Selena couldn't take it anymore. She stepped out. Excuse me, she said, her voice steady, though her heart thundered. Both heads turned. I'm sure this is a private matter. Perhaps you should take it somewhere else. Rachel looked amused. And you must be the reason he's playing bookstore Barbie. How quaint. Elias rose. That's enough, he said to Rachel. Then, gently to Selena, please give us a moment. In the alley behind the shop, Selena sat alone on the stone steps. She needed air, needed clarity, needed to breathe past the feeling that something was breaking. And it wasn't just business. She didn't care about empires, but she did care about lies. And Elias, he hadn't just been hiding his name. He'd been hiding wars. A few minutes later, he joined her. His face looked older than it had yesterday. More real. More haunted. He was my fiancé, he said simply. Selena looked away. How long? 5 years. On and off. Mostly for convenience. The board liked her. The press loved her. My father thought I needed someone like her to keep me in check. Did you love her? He shook his head. I don't think I knew what love was back then. I was too busy trying to survive legacy. She didn't speak, so he continued. When my father died, there was chaos. The board was divided. Rachel wanted to merge with a weapons firm. I said no. She tried to oust me. So I leaked something I shouldn't have. Memo. That proved Langston Enterprises had taken bailout money under false pretenses. It would have destroyed the company. But I thought, maybe it should be destroyed. Selena stared at him. So you burned your own name? I burned the empire that nearly killed me, and then I disappeared. Selena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, You should have told me. I know. More silence. Then he added, barely audible, I didn't think I'd deserve you if you knew the truth. That broke her. She turned to him, voice trembling. And who are you to decide what I deserve, Elias? He flinched, then nodded. You're right. She rose, staring down at him with eyes that held every wound she'd ever stitched shut on her own. I've spent my entire life being chosen last. For the scholarship, for the job, even by my own mother. I will not let you choose silence over me. She walked away. He didn't follow. Not yet. That night, back at her brownstone, Selena opened the old box of rejection letters she'd kept from years ago. Every college she didn't get into. Every job she'd lost to someone shinier. She found one she didn't remember. Job offer. Langston Enterprises, 2016. Internship declined due to restructuring. And on the corner, a scribble. A note. This isn't about your worth, it's about the system. Keep fighting. E.L. Her breath caught. He'd seen her before. Long before that night in the alley. She sank to the floor. Suddenly unsure of whether the love she had found was destiny or manipulation wrapped in good intentions. And either answer hurt. Session 8. The tape, the truth, and the storm. The next morning came with gray skies and a silence that settled over. Selena hadn't returned his texts. Not the one that said, "Please call me." Not the one that simply read, "I was wrong." Elias stood behind the counter, but he wasn't ringing up poetry anymore. He was staring at the front door like a man waiting for a verdict that might never come. Every time the bell above the entrance chimed, he flinched. But it was never her. It was never Selena. Instead, it was the past again, this time carrying a USB drive. Rachel, back in the red coat, with the same polished cruelty in her smile. "You didn't sign the papers," she said, "so I brought you incentive." She slid the drive across the counter. "I thought you might want to listen to what your sweet little bookstore girl said about you before you showed up in her alley." He froze. "What are you talking about?" Rachel leaned in. "Darling, don't you remember that our HR team flags background checks? Hers came up before you ever vanished. You were the one who told me to reject her application. But I guess she figured out how to catch your attention a different way." Elias's throat went dry. "That's not true. Isn't it?" Rachel gave one last look at the drive. "You should listen, but maybe not on a full stomach." And with that, she left. He stared at the little black object on the counter for 10 full minutes. Then finally, with a trembling hand, he plugged it into the old laptop they used for inventory. The screen lit up. One audio file. Dated 6 years ago. Before the alley. Before the bookstore. Before the fall. He hit play. Start of recording, March 3rd, 2019. Voice Selena. "And yes, I'm aware this interview is being recorded. Honestly, I don't expect to get the job. Langston Enterprises doesn't hire girls like me. They hire legacies, heirs, not daughters of nurses from Detroit who've spent their lives trying to prove they belong in rooms they weren't invited to." A pause. A soft laugh. "I've read every article about Elijah Langston, every rumor, every scandal. But there's something in his eyes in those photos. Something tired. Like he doesn't sleep anymore. I don't know what that means, but I feel it. Because I'm tired too." She clears her throat. "If he ever heard this, I'd probably be humiliated. But if I ever met him, really met him, I'd ask him one thing. Did you ever want to run away too? Not from scandal, but from being misunderstood by everyone who only sees your name, not your soul?" Another pause. Her voice cracked slightly. "Because I'd understand that. I really would." Of recording. Elias sat frozen. The room was spinning. Not because she had applied, but because of what she had said. Not manipulation. Not scheming. Dissonance. And recognition. She had seen him before she ever knew him. And he had rejected her anyway. Because she reminded him too much of his own reflection. And he'd been too much of a coward to see the mirror as a gift, not a threat. He ran. Through the streets. Through the rain. Through every memory that now hit harder than any headline ever had. He found her just as she was locking her brownstone door. The umbrella fell from her hands when she saw him. "Elijah?" He didn't speak. Not right away. He reached into his pocket and held out a folded printout. The transcript. Of her voice. Of her truth. Of the past she never meant for him to hear like this. She read it slowly. Her hands shook by the end. Her eyes shimmered. And when she looked at him again, they weren't angry. They were just tired. Like his. "Why didn't you tell me you heard it?" she whispered. "I just did." A beat. Then she asked the question she hadn't been brave enough to say before. "Have you known about me?" Elias looked at her like a man finally stepping into the light. "Since the alley. I recognized you from your file, from the interview, from the note I scribbled that I thought no one ever read." Selena blinked. "You wrote that?" He nodded. I was the one who added the rejection line. I thought I was protecting you from the mess I knew my company was about to become. He stared at him. Protecting me or protecting yourself from caring too much? The words landed like thunder. He stepped closer. You were the only real thing I'd seen in years, and I was afraid that if I let you in, I'd destroy you too. She stepped back. Tears rolled down, soft and soundless. You don't get to decide what breaks me, Elias. I know. You don't get to come back only when it's convenient. I know that too. And she crossed her arms. Why are you here now? He swallowed hard. Because I don't want to run anymore. I don't need a hero, she said. I don't want to be one. What do you want then? His voice dropped. I want to be forgiven. A beat passed. Then another. She looked up. I'm not ready to give you that. I'll wait. Even if it takes months? Even if it takes years? Oh, she studied him. This man. This once lost titan of business, standing in the rain with nothing but sincerity in his hands. Finally, she opened the door. Not wide. Just enough for him to see hope. Didn't have to arrive all at once. Sometimes it came in small invitations. Come in, she said softly, but don't say anything. He nodded and followed. Inside, they didn't talk. They just sat, side by side on the floor of her living room, wrapped in silence and old quilts, and a warmth that wasn't ready to be called love again. But maybe it could be. Session 9, the boardroom reckoning. By Monday morning, every whisper had turned into thunder. Langston Enterprises was bleeding rumors, and Selena's name was at the center of it. Not because of a scandal, but because of a proposal. One submitted by Elias Langston himself at 2:47, and the night he sat on Selena's living room floor, a proposal to dissolve the majority stake of Langston's private holding and transform. It was corporate suicide to some. To others, it was legacy. But to Rachel and the board, it was war. The boardroom was a fortress, floor-to-ceiling glass with skyline views and chairs too cold to comfort. Elias sat at the head of the table, for the first time in over 3 years. Not in a suit, not in arrogance, but in peace. That made them uneasy. Simply Rachel. You're proposing, she hissed, to give away 49% of Langston Enterprises to non-profit ventures with this woman's bookstore at the center? It's not hers, Elias said. It's ours. Every woman who was overlooked, every child who couldn't afford a library card, every man who thought literacy was a luxury, not a right. The quiet page was built by the forgotten. I was just the one hiding in it. A laugh came from the left side of the table. And you think that's enough to earn back control? Elias looked around, one by one, each person who had once watched him crash and burn. Each face that had turned their backs when the media called him unstable, when Rachel locked him out under the guise of health recovery. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply laid down the document. In 2 weeks, we launched the first national literacy grant funded by repurposed luxury real estate profits. We opened 3 reading centers in Detroit, Oakland, and Newark. And we give full scholarships to 100 applicants from the bottom 10% economic bracket, with no credit checks, no legacy preferences, and no board approval required. Nihilist. Elias pressed forward. I made Langston Enterprises a billion-dollar brand by predicting the market. But I failed to predict people. I failed to see that this, not another tech patent or energy merger, this is how we matter. Rachel scoffed. By turning us into a charity? No, Elias said, by turning us into something that outlives us. A younger board member, one Elias didn't recognize, spoke up. And the woman? Selena Myers? Elias met the question head on. She's not a pawn, she's not a prop. She's the only one who told me the truth when I was covered in dirt and shame. So yes, she'll be on the new board. And yes, she'll be compensated accordingly. Rachel slammed her folder shut. So this is personal? Elias stood. It's always been personal, Rachel. You just forgot what that feels like. He turned to leave. The vote's next Friday. I've said what I came to say. Selena waited outside the glass tower, unsure of how to feel. It was the first time she'd seen Elias back in that building, the one that had rejected her years ago, the one that had tried to erase his soul under layers of profit margins and media spins. He stepped out, exhausted but steady. She handed him a coffee without a word. He took it with a quiet thank you, their fingers brushing like a whispered promise. Did you tell them? She asked softly. Everything, he said, even about the alley. She looked up. Even the part where I thought you were a madman talking to pigeons? He chuckled. Especially that part. She smiled faintly. So, what happens next? I wait, he said, for them to either burn the legacy or bless it. Selena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You know, you don't need their vote to do what matters. I know, he said, but I want it. Because if I can turn the company that tried to erase both of us into a place that remembers, then maybe that boy in the alley and that girl with the folded resume didn't lose their battles after all. But Rachel had no intention of waiting. That evening, a private email was leaked to the press. A message Selena had sent 3 years ago for a second interview, and accidentally attaching a photo of her younger self, standing outside Langston Tower, wearing a homemade suit, with a note scribbled, I just want one chance to matter. The media twisted it. They called her a social climber, an opportunist, a manipulator. Within hours, the headlines read, From alley to empire, CEO's girlfriend wrote her way in. Langdon's lover? Liability. Was the homeless CEO's return a romance ruse? Selena stared at the screen like it might swallow her whole. I didn't send this to the press, she whispered. I know, Elias said, already dialing his lawyer. I was just trying to get a job. I didn't even know you then. I know. Her voice cracked. Do they? He wrapped his arms around her. And for the first time, Selena cried. Not because she was angry, but because history was repeating itself. Only now, she wasn't invisible. She was the target. The next morning, Elias called an emergency press conference. Not for damage control, but for the truth. The media room was packed. Elias walked to the podium. But instead of a prepared speech, the recording from her interview, the one she never knew they saved. He let them hear her voice, the rawness, the longing, the innocent. Then he stepped to the mic. What's who she is, and that's who I failed to protect. He looked into the sea of cameras. You're looking for a headline, here's mine. I rejected the woman who saw me before the world did, and I was wrong. Gasps rippled. But he wasn't done. To the board. If you don't want someone like that shaping the future of Langston, then you don't want me either. He walked off stage. Straight to her. No security. No PR filters. Just a man and a woman choosing each other in full daylight. Selena met him halfway. I didn't want you to do that. I didn't do it for you, he said. I did it because of you. And in that moment, with flashing lights all around and questions being screamed from every direction, Elias Langston did the most radical thing a CEO could ever do. He reached for her hand and didn't let go. Mission 10, the vote for forever. The boardroom was colder than usual. Or maybe it just felt that way because everything was on the line now. Elias Langston stood by the tall window, watching the city below. Just 2 years ago, that view made him feel like a god. Now, it humbled him, reminded him how easily the mighty fall, How grace wasn't in how high you stood, but in who you chose to lift with you. Selena wasn't in the building. She refused to be. I don't want to be a symbol, Elias, she'd said that morning. I'm not a trophy. If they want to vote, let them vote without staring at me like I'm the scandal. He'd nodded, kissed her on the forehead and whispered, this isn't about saving the company anymore. It's about saving what kind of man I am when no one's looking. The boardroom doors opened. 12 seats, 11 board members, 1 proposal. Rachel walked in last, immaculately dressed, her heels echoing power across the floor. Elias stood calmly. I appreciate you all coming, he said. This is not a hostile takeover. This is an invitation. To legacy. A silence. He pressed a button and the presentation began on the wall. Slide 1, the Quiet Page Literacy Initiative. And Slide 2, Net Worth Projections After Asset Restructuring. Slide 3, Long-Term Growth Forecasts Tied to Corporate Social Responsibility Impact. But it wasn't numbers that shook them. It was Slide 4, the photo. A grainy snapshot of Elias in the alley, upwrapped in blankets, feeding birds, his face gaunt, eyes haunted. Next to it, a photo of the same man standing beside a single mother outside her bookstore, handing books to children in line. The contrast wasn't strategy. That was truth. I built Langston Enterprises out of brilliance, Elias said, but I lost my soul in the process. I chased dominance. Now I chase meaning. Rachel folded her arms. And we're supposed to risk everything based on your redemption arc? Elias said, his voice steady. You're supposed to risk it based on proof. You turned to the next slide. It was a letter, typed on Langston's letterhead. Signed 3 years ago. By Rachel. Proving the suppression of reports regarding the collapse of one of their factory schools in Brazil. A disaster that claimed the lives of 3 workers. Covered. Buried. Selena had found it in the archives Elias gave her access to. I don't bring this to burn you, Elias said, turning to Rachel, but to remind everyone what silence costs, what reputation-based governance hides. Rachel's face paled. One of the younger board members cleared his throat. Are you blackmailing her? Elias replied, I'm inviting her to walk out with dignity, or to vote in favor of what the next generation actually deserves. Silence. Then the vote began. One by one. The first was a yes, but then a no, but then another no. Elias stood still. 3 yes, 4 no. Rachel smiled, triumphant, till the 5th vote came. A soft-spoken woman, graying at the temples, Marjorie Lane, their longest-serving advisor. She placed her vote card down. Yes. Her voice didn't waver. I watched men build empires and destroy them with ego. Elias is the first one who came back without it. Rachel's face twitched. 4-4. 3 more votes. The next was another yes. Then a no. It came down to 1. With the newest board member. A young black man named Marcus, brought in under Rachel's suggestion for diversity optics. He stood, looked Elias in the eye. I've watched from the sideline, watched you fall, watched you get up, not because you were forced, but because you chose to see the damage. He paused, and then looked at Rachel. I've also seen the emails, the cover-ups, and I didn't come here to be a puppet. He turned back. Final card in hand. I vote yes. 7-5. The room went still. Rachel pushed her chair back with force. You just doomed us all to become a charity case. We, Elias said, we just reclaimed our humanity. Outside, the air had changed. Word spread fast. Headlines flipped overnight. Langston legacy, reborn through billionaire CEO returns with plan to reshape capitalism. Unbroken to builder, Elias Langston's redemption is official. But Elias didn't care about the headlines. He cared about the woman he found sitting on the steps of the Quiet Page. Selena, alone, reading the same book she once offered him in that alley. "The Little Prince?" he asked softly. She looked up, her eyes shimmered. "I never finished it," she whispered. Elias sat beside her. And this time, he didn't hesitate. He opened the book, found the page she'd dog-eared years ago, and read aloud. "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." Selena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Does this mean it's done?" "No," he said. "It means it begins." 3 months later, Langston Enterprises launched its first scholarship cycle. 20,000 applications, 2,000 grants, 100 full-ride scholars, first generation, low pool, all of them carrying a piece of Elias and Selena's dream. The Quiet Page now had 3 locations, each built in neighborhoods where bookstores were once luxury, each named after someone Elias had met during his lowest days, including one named The Alley. At its ribbon cutting, he invited no press, just children, and one woman who once gave a stranger a sandwich and asked nothing in return. 1 year later, Selena stood beside Elias at the dedication of a new literacy research center. He introduced her not as a partner in love, but as a partner in vision. They weren't married yet. They didn't need to be. Their love had already rewritten more than any wedding ever could. But he did carry something in his pocket. A ring, not flashy, not massive, just simple gold, etched inside with the words, "We hadn't walked away that day." And the rest of the sentence? He never told anyone, except her. That night, under string lights in the alley where it all began, he whispered it into her palm. "Maybe we could have started this life sooner, but I think we needed to break first, to build something better." Selena smiled through tears. And for the first time in years, both of them, billionaire and bookseller, broken and healed, finally believed in forever. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive in grand entrances or perfect timing. It shows up in alleyways, wrapped in brokenness, hungry for truth. Elias Langston had everything money could buy, but none of it could teach him how to love. And Selena? She had nothing but her heart, yet it was the very thing that saved him. This story isn't just about a billionaire's redemption or a single mother's quiet courage. It's about the miracle of second chances, about how dignity can be restored, about how the smallest act of kindness, a sandwich, a book, a moment of listening, and for anyone out there who feels invisible, unchosen, or too ordinary to matter, remember this: the world isn't changed by those who have it all. It's changed by those brave enough to give, even when they have nothing left. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever helped someone without knowing who they truly were? Do you believe in second chances, even when they seem impossible? To drop a comment and tell us your thoughts. If this story touched you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe for more true love stories that heal the heart and inspire the soul. Because here, we believe. Sometimes, the richest hearts wear the poorest clothes. And love always finds its way home.